My name is Emily Hartman, and for 3 years straight, I sent $3,000 every single month to my sister Olivia so she could keep her luxury penthouse in downtown Dallas from sliding into foreclosure. 3 years, 36 transfers, over $100,000. All sent quietly from my tiny one-bedroom apartment in Austin, where my mattress sagged in the middle and the AC rattled like it was begging to retire. Meanwhile, Olivia posted photos of her life: rooftop champagne toasts, VIP pool parties, glittering sunsets reflecting off floor-to-ceiling windows. Every caption read like a Hallmark card for success: work hard, live harder, blessed beyond measure, closed another deal. But I knew the truth behind those pictures. The mortgage notices, the missed payments, the desperate late-night calls that always began with, I'm drowning. Can you help just one more month?" I never told anyone. I didn't complain. I convinced myself that family loyalty meant shutting up and stepping in. It meant doing the heavy lifting quietly without ever expecting credit. So I hustled, freelancing past midnight, teaching online design classes on weekends, taking every commission I could get my hands on. I lived on frozen meals and instant coffee, all so Olivia could keep her penthouse, her image, her curated perfection. Everything finally snapped on Memorial Day weekend. Just a few months ago, Olivia threw one of those huge pool parties she was famous for, the kind filled with Dallas developers, tech investors, Instagram influencers, and people who smelled like they were dipped in money. She told me she needed a hand with the food. That was her polite way of saying, "Come work my party for free so I look good." I showed up at 7 in the morning with bags of groceries, hair tied back, ready to help like always. I set up folding tables, I marinated chicken, I grilled burgers in the Texas sun until sweat dripped down my back. I smiled at guests who barely looked at me, the helper in the background of their selfies. By 3 p.m., the party was in full swing, music blasting, drinks flowing, Olivia gliding through the crowd like some queen of curated luxury. I was standing by the grill when one of her clients pointed at me and asked, "Who's she?" Olivia didn't even hesitate. She just laughed, the kind of laugh that slices you open without trying. She said, "Oh, that's just my sister Emily, sweet girl, but honestly, no ambition, kind of nobody in this market." Her clients laughed, harder than they needed to. And I stood there holding metal tongs like they were the only thing keeping me upright. I felt something inside me crack, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, clean, final. The kind of crack you don't recover from. If you've ever poured your heart into helping someone who treated you like you were disposable, leave a comment below. And hit subscribe because this story only gets darker, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. When the laughter died down, I set the tongs aside. No big scene, no shouting match. I simply walked out the gate, got into my car, and drove away. Olivia didn't even notice I'd left. The drive back to Austin was quiet, windows down, the night air hot and heavy, my phone buzzing nonstop with party updates Olivia posted like I wasn't even a real person who existed in her life. But as the highway stretched in front of me, everything became painfully clear. I wasn't her sister. I was her safety net, her silent sponsor, her personal ATM. And that night, I made the decision that would flip her entire world upside down. I would never send another dollar again. What happened next? Well, that part is almost unbelievable, but completely deserved. Driving back to Austin that night, the highway lights blurred like smeared paint across my windshield. Somewhere between Waco and Temple, I pulled into a quiet gas station, leaned my forehead on the steering wheel, and let everything hit me at once. Not anger, not yet. Just this deep, aching sadness I didn't even know I'd been carrying. It felt like someone finally turned the volume up on a truth I'd been refusing to hear for years. To understand why I kept helping Olivia, why I kept excusing every red flag, you'd have to know where we came from. We grew up in El Paso in a beige rental house that shook every time a semi-truck barreled down the highway behind it. Our dad, Michael Hartman, worked highway maintenance for the state. Long days under the Texas sun, reflective vest faded from years of wear. Mom, Laura, worked cashier shifts at a 24-hour grocery store, sometimes coming home with her feet so swollen she'd sit on the kitchen floor before even taking her shoes off. We didn't have much, but what we did have, they earned with their hands. Calloused, tired, but steady. Our parents drilled one principle into us, almost like scripture. Family takes care of family, no matter what. No scorekeeping. Olivia absorbed that lesson differently than I did. She saw it as permission, proof that someone would always catch her when she stumbled. I saw it as duty, an unspoken promise I felt responsible for keeping. Growing up, Olivia was the golden girl, smart, charismatic, razor sharp even as a teenager. She graduated high school early, got a business degree, landed a job at a real estate firm in Dallas, and within 2 years was closing deals that made our parents beam with pride. She bought designer heels while I saved coins in a jar for art supplies. My path was slower, quieter. I worked at a coffee shop near my community college, taught myself graphic design through online tutorials, and built a small portfolio piece by piece. By 25, I had stable freelance clients, local bakeries, mom-and-pop shops, a few Austin startups. I lived within my means, drank cheap wine with friends in tiny apartments, and biked everywhere to avoid car repairs I couldn't afford. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was late, past 11 p.m., when Olivia called me in 2017, her voice trembling. The housing market in Dallas had hit a rough patch. Her commissions dried up. She and her husband, Brandon, had bought a penthouse that was way beyond their budget once the bonuses stopped rolling in. "They're 2 payments behind, Em," she cried. "Just for a few months. I swear, once things pick up, I'll pay you back." My stomach clenched when she told me the amount. $3,000 a month. Nearly half of everything I made after taxes. It wasn't just a stretch, it was a sacrifice. A painful one. But then I heard Dad's voice in my head. Family helps family. So I said yes. Those first months almost felt good in a strange way. Olivia was grateful, overly so. She sent handwritten note thank yous, delivered cupcakes to my door, even drove to Austin once with a lasagna she cooked herself. She'd call after her daughter Ava's soccer practices and talk about new listing opportunities. For a moment, it felt like we were close again, like we were kids sharing Kool-Aid on the porch. But beneath the surface, the cost was piling up. I skipped my annual dentist appointment because I didn't have the extra $200. I canceled a design workshop I'd been dreaming of attending. I stopped buying fresh produce. I took on any job that came my way. Logo revisions at 2 a.m., website overhauls on weekends, invitations for bridal showers I wasn't even invited to. Friends would ask me out for trivia nights or hiking trips, and I'd say, maybe next week, knowing next week would look exactly like this one. I lived in survival mode, not because I was irresponsible, but because I was responsible for someone else's irresponsibility. And yet, I still believed I was doing the right thing. When Olivia sent me photos of Ava's birthday party, string lights over the pool, cupcakes arranged like a mermaid tail, I smiled. I told myself I was helping keep a family whole, that my sacrifice meant stability for my niece, that this was love, not loss. But looking back now, I realized something painful. I wasn't just helping Olivia, I was disappearing so she could shine. And she didn't even notice. Things didn't shift overnight. That's the part that still stings. It wasn't one explosive betrayal. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down a stone. 1,000 tiny moments I didn't want to see for what they were. The second year of helping Olivia was when the cracks really started to show. Her phone calls grew shorter. Her tone changed, from grateful to expectant, from humbling to entitled. Instead of thank you, it became, did you send it yet? Instead of, I can't believe you're helping us, it became, we really need you to stay consistent this month. Meanwhile, the life she presented online evolved into a highlight reel of excess. One afternoon, while I was hunched over my desk doing last-minute revisions for a client, she posted a boomerang of herself popping champagne on a balcony overlooking the Dallas skyline. The caption read, "You have to treat yourself. Life is short." Treat herself. With what money? It wasn't just the posts, it was the behavior behind them. There was the day I drove to Dallas to drop off a flash drive with files she needed urgently for an open house. I pulled into her 3-car garage and stopped behind her brand new Lexus RX, still wearing its dealer plates. She came downstairs wearing sunglasses big enough to black out the sun, waving her phone like it was a magic wand. Don't freak out about the car, I got an amazing deal. You have to project success to sell success. I forced a smile. Meanwhile, I was driving a car whose AC only worked if I kicked the glove compartment twice. Another time, she casually mentioned she and Brandon took a weekend business trip to the Bahamas, complete with a private beach cabana and a photographer who followed them for branding content. My chest tightened as I mentally recalculated. How many client logos would I have to redesign to make up for that month's $3,000? How many nights would I spend sitting on my apartment floor, editing until 3 a.m. to keep her afloat while she sipped coconut drinks on a beach? But every time doubt crept in, I shoved it down and reminded myself that she was family, that she'd helped Mom and Dad more than I had in the past, that maybe she was just coping with stress in her own way. Then came the conversations that made my skin crawl. One day I arrived early to pick up Ava from dance. Olivia had a closing she couldn't miss. Ava climbed into my car, little sparkly tutu still on, and stared at my dashboard. "Aunt Emily," she said, wrinkling her tiny nose, "why doesn't your car have screens in the back like ours?" She asked it innocently. Kids always do. But it hit me anyway. Before I could answer, Brandon approached the car, leaned down, and gave a chuckle that carried a sting. "She drives a humble little thing." He said it as if it were an endearing flaw. Maybe one day she'll upgrade. The implication, soft, almost invisible, burrowed deep. Humble little thing. It was the same tone Olivia used when she said things like, "You're lucky you don't have real stress. You wouldn't understand what it's like managing money at my level. You don't have kids, so you have more free time anyway." She weaponized her success and my sacrifice, without ever acknowledging the irony that her level of living existed because I was silently bankrolling it. And somewhere along the line, appreciation evaporated entirely. Her texts became demands. "Send it ASAP. Mortgage due Friday. Don't forget this month." No emojis, no kindness, just commands. Meanwhile, I was skipping meals to stretch my grocery budget. My friends had practically stopped inviting me to weekend plans because they assumed I would decline again. I had turned my world into a machine built for one purpose: to keep Olivia's lifestyle alive. The worst part, she didn't even care how it affected me. One weekend I mentioned I was exhausted from a 60-hour work week. She sighed and said, "I wish you had your life sometimes. Freelancers have it easy. No boss, no pressure." I nearly laughed from disbelief. No pressure? Try being the hidden pillar holding up someone else's mansion. The resentment didn't explode all at once. It simmered, boiled,
thickened into something heavy that sat on my chest every time I clicked transfer money. But the anger wasn't just about the money. It was about feeling invisible, a ghost in my own story, a background character in hers. And the worst was still yet to come.
By the start of the third year, the resentment I tried so hard to swallow had carved out a hollow space inside me. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was being dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. That's what happens when you've spent a lifetime being the reliable one. You forget you're allowed to break. It didn't happen in a dramatic, cinematic moment. It was slow, quiet, the way winter creeps into a house through tiny cracks you can't see. Most nights, I sat hunched over my laptop until the sun rose. My back ached constantly, my vision blurred whenever I scrolled too fast. I lived off microwaved noodles and dollar store soup because I needed every extra cent to cover Olivia's transfer. My emergency fund stayed empty for months at a time. Sleep became optional. Anxiety became routine. But the emotional weight, that's what almost crushed me. I'd stare at the calendar, mentally counting 3 more days until another $3,000 disappears again. Some nights I cried without sound, just tears sliding down my face as I worked through logo revisions that paid a fraction of what I was sending away. I'd go to wash my face and see a version of myself I barely recognized. Exhausted, pale, depleted, a ghost with dark circles. Still, I pushed forward. Still, I told myself I was doing the right thing. Olivia didn't make it easier. She called less often. When she did, she rarely asked how I was. It was always, "Did you get the invoice I sent? Remember, the first is coming up. Don't forget, late payments trigger fees." At some point, she stopped pretending it was temporary. Every time I tried to hint at my burnout, she redirected the conversation back to herself. When I mentioned taking fewer clients because my hands cramped, she sighed and said, Please don't be dramatic. Everyone's tired." When I mentioned struggling to cover my car insurance after a rate hike, she shrugged and said, "That's adulthood. You'll figure it out." When I mentioned maybe skipping a payment one month, she went silent. Then coolly replied, "I just need you to stay consistent. Don't put us in a bad position." Us. Like we were a team. Like she wasn't the one drowning me. Every time I tried to talk to Dad or Mom, I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. Dad would worry, Mom would ask questions, and I didn't want Olivia to look bad. I didn't want anyone to think our family was fractured. I held everything alone because I didn't want to be the reason things broke. But things were breaking. They were just breaking inside me. The moment that finally snapped something in my chest came on a Tuesday night. I had pulled an all-nighter for a tech startup rebrand, my eyes burning, my hands shaking from too much coffee and too little food. I emailed over the final files and collapsed onto my couch, still in yesterday's clothes. That's when Olivia texted me, "Hey, can you redesign my brokerage's seasonal flyers? Need them by Friday. Do it as a favor." No payment, no hesitation, no awareness. I stared at the message for a full minute, thumb hovering, breath caught somewhere between a sob and a laugh. I realized in that moment something brutally simple. She didn't see me. Not really. Not my exhaustion, my sacrifices, my limits. She only saw what I could provide, and I had nothing left to give. Not money, not time, not pieces of myself. I was running on fumes, and still, somehow, I felt guilty for wanting to stop. The night of Olivia's Memorial Day party stayed with me long after I left her backyard. The way she laughed, the way she dismissed me as if I were some inconvenience she had inherited. Not a sister, not someone who had quietly sacrificed years of her life so she could keep pretending hers was perfect. The words kept replaying in my mind like a broken tape. Sweet, but no ambition. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't scream or break down. What I felt was clarity. Cold, sharp, unmistakable clarity. Around midnight, somewhere outside Hillsborough, I pulled off the highway into an empty rest stop and sat under the fading fluorescent lights. My hands were still shaking from the heat of the grill, but my mind felt strangely clear. It was the first time in years that I wasn't confused about what needed to be done. I opened my phone, scrolled to the bank app, and stared at the scheduled transfer due in 6 days. My thumb hovered over the cancel button, hesitating only because old habits cling to you like vines, even when they're choking you. But then I heard Olivia's laughter again. I saw her guests raising their glasses. I remembered the sunburn on my shoulders, the ache in my back, the grease on my hands, all while she floated around calling me a nobody. And I tapped Cancel Transfer. The confirmation screen glowed softly in the dark car interior. Recurring payment canceled. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, back in Austin, I sat at my tiny kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I made a list titled, What I Need to Rebuild. It had 3 bullet points: my finances, my health, my life. Simple, basic, but it was the first time I'd put myself on a list in over 1,000 days. I opened a spreadsheet and calculated how much I had given Olivia over the years. The number hit hard, harder than I expected, but instead of feeling regret, I felt determination. It wasn't too late. I could still undo some of the damage. I could still rebuild what had been taken piece by piece. Then came the calls. First, Olivia. I let it ring. Then Brandon. Ignored. Then Olivia again, voicemails full of faux concern that quickly turned into irritation when I didn't respond. I blocked both numbers. The silence afterward felt almost holy. A boundary, a real one, for the first time in my adult life. With the noise gone, I dove headfirst into rebuilding. I updated my portfolio, refreshed my rates, reached out to old contacts, and ironically landed 2 major contracts within a week. It was like the universe had been waiting for me to stop giving everything away so I could start receiving again. I bought groceries without counting coins. I slept through the night without setting an early alarm for freelance revisions. I made coffee in the morning and drank it slowly, deliberately, like I was relearning what it meant to have a normal life. Most importantly, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't lost. I was preparing, because deep down I knew what was coming for Olivia. And this time, I wasn't going to cushion her fall. The first sign that Olivia's world was cracking came just 11 days after I canceled the transfer. I was in the middle of designing a logo for a new boutique cafe when an unfamiliar Dallas number flashed across my phone screen. I let it go to voicemail, assuming it was Olivia using someone else's phone. I was right. Her message sounded calm at first, almost too calm. Hey, Em. I think the bank must have made a mistake. They say the mortgage wasn't paid this month. Can you call me back? I didn't. 2 hours later, she called again. This time, her voice trembled. Emily, please. They're saying we're 60 days behind. I just need to understand what's going on. But I stayed silent. She had spent years ignoring the cost of her choices. Now she would have to confront them without me running interference. By the end of the week, the cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were full fractures. A notice of default was taped to her penthouse door. Her HOA fees, already overdue, triggered an additional fine.
The car dealership called about her promotional financing, and the IRS, apparently acting faster than usual, sent a letter about irregularities in her past tax deductions. This time, when she called, her voice wasn't calm or irritated. It was terrified. She left a breathless voicemail saying, "Em, I need that payment. Just for now, please. They're threatening legal action. This could ruin my license." There it was. The real fear. Not for her home, not for her marriage, but for her image. Still, I didn't call back. Then came the meltdown. She switched strategies, anger replacing fear. She texted paragraph after paragraph. "I can't believe you would abandon us like this. You're putting Ava at risk. This is selfish, Emily. You're choosing yourself over your own family. Have you completely lost your sense of responsibility?" Responsibility. The word made me laugh out loud. I had carried responsibility for both of us for 3 years. She had never carried even 1 month of mine. A day later, Brandon joined the chorus. His texts were crueler. "Grow up. You're acting like a victim. We're drowning because of you. You owe us consistency." Consistency. Another hollow word. I blocked him without hesitation. Then the real storm hit. 3 weeks after the missed payment, Olivia's real estate license was officially suspended pending IRS review. The firm she worked for issued a statement about temporary leave, but industry people aren't stupid. Whispers spread across Dallas like wildfire. Her colleagues unfollowed her online. Her clients ghosted her. The investors she bragged about disappeared. Image is everything in real estate, and once hers cracked, the whole persona she built came crashing down. Meanwhile, Ava had to withdraw from her private academy because tuition bounced. She posted a vague Facebook update saying, "Some family members aren't who they appear to be," inviting sympathy from people who didn't know the truth. But the mortgage company knew the truth. The IRS knew the truth. And soon, the courthouse knew it too. At the 90-day mark, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. I learned about it from Megan, our cousin who works as a paralegal. She texted me a screenshot of the filing with a short message. "You might want to see this." When I opened the document and saw Olivia's name attached to the case, I didn't feel joy exactly. I felt justice. Brandon tried selling his golf clubs, then his luxury watch collection, then the outdoor furniture Olivia had custom made for their rooftop deck. It barely made a dent. And then the day came, the day that marked the end of Olivia's carefully curated empire. The penthouse was auctioned off on the courthouse steps. No fanfare, no audience, just a handful of investors bidding on someone else's fantasy. Olivia stood off to the side, sunglasses hiding puffy eyes, arms crossed like she was cold despite the Texas heat. Brandon paced behind her, jaw clenched, muttering into his phone about options that clearly didn't exist. They lost the house, they lost the lifestyle, they lost every piece of the world they built on borrowed money and on borrowed generosity. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Irving. Gone were the rooftop selfies, the champagne brunches, the curated luxury. Her Instagrams shifted from glamorous to silent. And I didn't get involved. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I simply watched from a distance as karma did what I never had the energy to do: hold her accountable. The truth is, I didn't need revenge. Olivia's own choices were the architect of her downfall. All I had to do was step aside.
Life after Olivia's collapse didn't feel triumphant the way people imagine. There wasn't some cinematic swell of music, no fireworks, no victory lap. What I felt instead was a quiet, steady reclaiming of space. My space, the kind I had given away piece by piece without realizing it. 3 months after the foreclosure, I closed on a modest but beautiful condo in South Austin. It wasn't big, but it felt like freedom, the kind of freedom I hadn't felt since before Olivia's late-night plea for help years ago. I walked through the front door for the first time holding a set of keys that belonged entirely to me, and something inside my chest unfurled, like lungs filling for the first real breath in years. My mom came over the next morning carrying a pot of homemade stew and a small box of herb cuttings from her garden. She set them on my counter, looked around my new place, and whispered, "I'm proud of you." There was no lecture, no probing questions, just a mother acknowledging her daughter's healing. We sat on the balcony sipping coffee, watching the light roll across the walking trail behind my building. Mom talked about her roses, her neighbor's new dog, the heat wave coming next week. Ordinary things. Beautifully ordinary. And for the first time, those moments didn't feel overshadowed by a looming payment deadline or Olivia's next crisis. My friend Lena came over later with takeout and a potted plant that, in her words, better not die on your watch. We laughed, sat on the floor, and ate noodles straight from the containers. She asked how I felt, not about Olivia, about me. I had to think for a moment before answering. "I feel whole," I said, and saying it out loud made it true. Meanwhile, Olivia and Brandon stabilized in ways that had nothing to do with returning to their old lifestyle. Olivia found an administrative job at a small downtown firm. Paperwork, filing, no commissions, no glam. Brandon taught part-time golf lessons at a public course, scraping together enough for rent and groceries. Their daughter Ava picked up weekend babysitting to help cover school supplies. I didn't check in on them directly, but news trickled through the family grapevine. My dad stopped by once with sandwiches from an old deli we loved. His shoulders slumped a little deeper than usual. He mentioned passing by a garage sale in Irving, boxes labeled household items, furniture, clothes. He didn't say Olivia's name, but he didn't have to. Still, he didn't pressure me to reconnect. Maybe for the first time in my life, he understood that peace sometimes looks like distance. One afternoon, a letter arrived at my new address, forwarded from my old apartment. I knew the handwriting instantly, Olivia's. I opened it in the lobby, standing between the mailboxes and the mending machine. She wrote that she wanted to borrow money one last time, promising repayment with interest, insisting she'd changed, that Ava deserved a new start. She attached photos of their cramped apartment, evidence of her struggle. I read it once, then folded it carefully and slipped it into a drawer at home. Not thrown away, just put aside, exactly where the past belongs. I didn't respond. Some people think closure requires a confrontation or a heartfelt apology. Maybe for some, it does. But for me, closure came the moment I realized I didn't owe her an explanation. My silence wasn't punishment. It was protection, a boundary made of years of lessons learned the hard way. As for me, my freelance business took off. I signed 2 national clients, raised my rates, and even hired a part-time assistant. I bought real groceries, things that grew from the ground, not from a microwave. I slept with ease instead of guilt. I woke up excited instead of exhausted. And I learned something I wish I'd understood sooner. Kindness is beautiful, but kindness without limits becomes permission. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're self-respect. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is stop saving them. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. And if any part of this hit home, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my position? Have you ever carried someone until you had nothing left for yourself? Share your experience in the comments below.
And if you want more real stories like this, stories about turning points, hard lessons, and finding strength where you least expect it, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear tonight.